Hello and welcome to Armenian News Network Groong, Week in Review. This episode of the podcast was fully devoted to the war in Artsakh. It was recorded on the morning of Saturday, October 3 Pacific Time, while one of our guests, Varuzhan Geghamyan, was in Stepanakert as the city was undergoing constant bombardment. Unfortunately, the air assault on Stepanakert and other civilian areas of Artsakh seems to have only intensified, with more active use of cluster bombs, long-range missiles, and suicide drones. As of early Monday morning Pacific Time, we have confirmed that Varuzhan is okay, though he communicated that the situation is dangerous as the city is still undergoing constant bombardment. The use of cluster munitions, let alone targeting of civilian structures, is prohibited by international law, and it seems that the dictator in Baku, Ilham Aliyev, is intent to level the city to the ground. As of this time, according to the Artsakh Foreign Ministry, 19 civilians have been killed, 80 wounded, and over 2,700 property and civilian infrastructure has been damaged. We're worried about the safety of Artsakh's peaceful civilian population and urge you to raise awareness of this travesty among your non-Armenian friends and elected representatives. For a week now, our focus here at Groong has been the war. What started in the early morning of Sunday, 27th of September as an all-out attack on the line of contact quickly escalated into a large-scale war, with Azerbaijan attacking civilian targets in both Artsakh and in Armenia. On October 3rd, we published a conversation we had with Giray Libaridian and Tom Deval, exploring the meta-analysis of the conflict, which you may find interesting. So check out episode 19 for that recording. Today, we will discuss with our analysts from Armenia, Artsakh, and in the US, some of the developments and the outlook around the ongoing war. To talk about these issues, we have with us Varuzhan Geghamyan, who is assistant professor at the Yerevan State University and teaches on Turkey's modern history and the history of Azerbaijan. Aspet Kochikyan, who is a senior lecturer of political science and international relations at Bentley University in Massachusetts. Marine Manucharyan, no relation, president of the Civic Forum NGO. Her areas of focus include Artsakh, the Armenian Armed Forces, national security, and foreign policy. And Emil Sanamyan, a senior research fellow at USC's Institute of Armenian Studies, specializing in the politics in the Caucasus with a special focus on Azerbaijan. Hello and welcome, everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Our first question is for Varuzhan. Varuzhan, we've been hearing many reports about life under fire in Stepanakert and other parts of Artsakh. We are fortunate to have you here from Stepanakert. Could you describe the general mood in Artsakh? How are people handling the militarized environment, the society, the people? What is daily life like for the past week?
Thank you, Hovik. Thank you for having me. Yes, it is correct. I'm in Stepanakert for already a week now. And I can say that we have a very extraordinary situation from the one hand and very normal situation from the other hand. What I'm trying to say is that people in a way are, of course, worried, but the general assumption of the situation and the legacy we have here in Artsakh, and in general, the legacy we have in Armenia, the legacy of war, makes us to be more prepared for war and situations like this. So in a way, people of course are worried because war is always war. But on the other hand, we have people clearly understanding what's going on, and they are ready to do what is necessary for the situations like this. So the military is doing its job. Civilians are doing their everyday, trying to conduct their everyday life in a ways that are not so dangerous, especially in Stepanakert, which is under permanent shelling by the Azerbaijani side, and currently, even at this moment of the recording, it's being shelled as well. So this is the general situation. But as I said, there is no situation of panic or anything which is trying to be described by the Azerbaijani information propaganda.
I have to say that the level of unconditional solidarity displayed by Armenians everywhere this week is something else, and I wish we had a small fragment of that in peacetime. But I also wanted to ask, what is the people's outlook towards the future? I mean, do they think this is a temporary thing, or are they accepting the fact that this may be a longer term battle, and are they how are they handling that aspect of it?
In the beginning of the war, everybody was trying to compare it with the war of 2016, April War, so called, and this was of course also projected on the things like timeline and time frame, and many, both here in Artsakh and many in Yerevan in Armenia, they thought that this is going to be something like April War, so 3-4 days. But already for 2 days now, everybody clearly, at least in Artsakh, clearly understand that this is totally different thing, and probably it will take much longer, especially taking account activities and the initiatives taken by Azerbaijani side. They are trying to show that they are ready to go to do whatever they can to use all the armaments, all the military equipments, and everything, every capacity they have to reach the result, which is right now highly communicated by the Azerbaijani officials high rankings. They are, as you know, probably they are talking about not about taking 2 or 3 regions or something like that, but clearly, as they say, solving the Karabakh issue and bring back Karabakh to Azerbaijan, so-called. So people here in Stepanakert and in Artsakh, they clearly understand this. And if we take also the last speech by the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, we can say that at least in Armenia, in the Armenian government and the ruling elite, now it is clear as well that this is going to be much longer and much difficult war, and this is something like the first Artsakh war in the 1990s.
Marine, you're in Yerevan, and just before the fighting started, you were planning to go to Artsakh to visit family. What are your perspectives and impressions of the general mood in Yerevan and Armenia as a whole?
Well, I have to absolutely agree with. I don't have to. I testify and I agree with the Varuzhan that the unity is enormous now all over Armenia and also in Artsakh. Artsakh probably 10 times more. I get also phone calls. I have family entire borderline also in Tavush region in the north. They are all very worried for their brothers in Artsakh, and my family is still in there in Karabakh. It was a bit worrisome, ups and downs. You know how it is during war. Some informations are coming, some are going, some are good, some are bad. So in any case, the spirit is pretty strong. And I should also probably mention that we are begging them to, like, at least for my mom to leave, but she refuses to. For everyone is understandable that everybody thinks that this is our last fight. So the spirit is literally in accordance with that. The spirit is very strong, and people, even the prime minister today compared it with Sardarabad, the crucial fight we had back in the beginning of the 20th century. So yeah, I will still go to Karabakh. I am sure I will go there a million times more. So yeah, we're strong at this point.
Varuzhan, let me just jump to then immediately to geopolitics. And the biggest element that's new here that probably did not exist throughout in this level of potency, Turkey and its active status in this war. You follow Turkish politics closely, and what are your thoughts and observations about the public relations, diplomatic, as well as the military support that Turkey is lending to Azerbaijan? And also, does Turkey want to be directly involved in the conflict in Armenia?
It is pretty much clear for everybody, both here in the region and outside of the region, that Turkey is involved in the conflict. And it is pretty much clear that now it is not only indirectly involved, but also directly, because in the recent years we actively we discussed the situation around Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and we always mentioned the role of Turkey, which first of all closed the border with Armenia and in a way participates indirectly to the conflict. But the main factor was that Turkey, starting from April war and particularly in the recent 2 years, they mentioned their desire to change all the architecture of the conflict negotiations around Karabakh. And this desire was a tool to widen its influence in this region. This is not only about Armenia, this is about the region which is highly accepted in Turkey and the Turkish ruling elite as one of the main areas of Turkish interest. So it's it's not the heartland, but something like near the heartland. And that's why, and especially in the recent years, with the Turkish foreign policies turned to its close neighborhood, this is very, let's say, predictable turn and very, it's not surprising at all. The surprising factor is that it is even not trying to say that we are not involved in the conflict and we are trying to support the dialogue and negotiations and peaceful talks. Turkey is very openly supporting Azerbaijan, and so the main idea is that we can say that Turkey is already directly involved in the conflict. There is nothing left to say that this is not a direct or not a direct involvement.
Prospect Kochikyan, I wanted to ask you, in contrast to Turkey, Russia seems to be pretty passive so far. Can you give a brief synopsis of your discussion yesterday with Jiray Libarian and Tom DeWall on this issue?
Yeah, Varuzhan makes a very good point. I mean, the involvement of Turkey directly or indirectly is not an issue. It's the issue of officially involved or not. Direct involvement has been there. It's obvious. And this is something that yesterday in our conversations, as we mentioned with Tom Deval and Jiray Libarian, we did talk about as well. Now, the two guests yesterday actually had a bit of a disagreement on the issue of whether or not, why is Russia so passive? From Tom Deval's perspective, it was mostly that Russia was caught off guard, whereas Jiray Libarian thought that not necessarily synergy or agreement, but there is, Russia is observing the situation, is aware of Turkish involvement, but has chosen not to be involved directly or officially. Again, I think there's a fine line between direct and official. Overall, both guests did agree that this is an attempt to move the issue of Nagorno-Karabakh negotiations away from the OSCE in Minsk process. I personally gave the title, or I prescribed this as a Euro-Atlantic sort of framework of analysis to a more regional analysis or a regional framework of resolving the conflict that includes Turkey, Russia, and to some extent Iran. Although we didn't touch upon or we did touch upon Iran, but it wasn't in depth. So it is quite an interesting case where Turkey has unequivocally been supporting, probably unequivocal is a better term than direct, indirect versus formal, informal, supporting Azerbaijan, whereas Russia's support has been in the context of providing the weapons granted, but also calling both sides to negotiate rather than to fight. One thing I have to mention that just before the recording yesterday, Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, made an announcement saying that Russia is willing and ready to host the negotiations again, individually or within the framework of the OSCE. I think this is telling in a sense that Russia is trying to find trying to find a way to take this away, the negotiations and the Karabakh conflict framework away from the Minsk, but not doing so not so obviously.
Emil, then I guess I'd like to ask you, you're pretty active on social media, general, following the media. The Armenian social and news media have been working around the clock to provide information and details about the war. For example, as soon as the information is verified, the ministries publish daily, sometimes hourly, updates on casualties on both sides, targets, equipment captured and destroyed, etc. If this weren't so awful, we could call this a social war or a social media war, with the selfie equivalent of each major event or destruction published on social media. But going beyond this, how do you see this war progressing in the coming days? What are the factors on the Armenian and Azerbaijani sides that will determine the duration and intensity of the war?
So the intensity of this fighting has been unprecedented for the Armenian armed forces, for Azerbaijan. So that probably is one of the key factors that will limit the duration of these hostilities. Is just there is just not that many people on either side, and only obviously we have the mercenaries now that are fighting, but going through this meat grinder fairly fast. As well, and of course their motivation levels are not as as great considering the way this fighting is going. So I can't predict what's going to happen, and my predictions have not been met by past week. I expected this fighting to start to calm down faster. Clearly, without Russia sort of taking any active steps, it seems like it might go on for at least another week. But we'll see. It really depends on the extent of Putin and Erdogan pushing each other on this matter, because the fighting is driven by Turkey's participation. They're in charge of it.
Both Pashinyan and Aliyev gave interviews on Al Jazeera today, or I believe yesterday. Aliyev announcing that the reason why Armenia escalated the war is because of internal political crises in Armenia, while Pashinyan reiterating the argument that Armenia is acting as a guarantor of Karabakh's Armenian population. Aspet Kochikyan, what are your thoughts on that?
I listened to both interviews. It was recorded or it was posted on October 3rd, which is today. But again, with the time zones, who knows when it's today, when it's tomorrow, or yesterday. Aliyev's statements actually are very much in tune, reiteration of what they have done before, always blaming the Armenian side, especially internal politics of the condition. There were a couple of things, though, in Aliyev's statements that did catch my eye in terms of he was complaining that the international law is not used equally when it comes to, or is not applied in the case of Karabakh, in many issues. He left it vague, intentionally probably. But his constant message was that Armenia started the war because they wanted to distract attention from internal political crisis, arguing that right before the war there was political instability in the country, and as such, Nikol Pashinyan wanted to distract that internal political dimension. It's fascinating also that he did mention that they had Aliyev himself, Azerbaijan, was making some progress under the previous regime in Armenia, and that his experience in negotiating, he felt that they were getting closer for some kind of an agreement. But he also again threw back the accusation that the new government, when they came to power, they basically wanted to restart thing. In his word, they tried to destroy, or they destroyed the elaborated principles on which they had agreed. Probably this is an attempt to create a divide within internal political context in Armenia. On the other hand, Pashinyan's interview, again with Al Jazeera, was same old in terms of arguing about the right of self-determination, and that Armenia is acting only as a guarantor of the protection of the ethnic Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. I think that this is beyond being a guarantor, and the question remains now to what extent Armenia will be officially involved as a side in the conflict, not as just supporting Azerbaijan. I mean, obviously the Azerbaijani shelling of Armenia contributes to this, but at the same time, it's something that could easily escalate. One of the things I wanted to also add that just prior to that, listening to that, I also listened to Prime Minister Pashinyan's speech, about 7-8 minutes, while I was compared notes with other analysts about the content of his statement, where he said that we're going to fight until victory. That part sort of got me thinking whether or not Armenia is digging in for the long term and might not even accept any invitations to go back to the negotiation table.
Emil, you have any thoughts on this?
If I can, add a couple of thoughts on what Aliyev was saying. Aliyev is frequently engaged in projecting own sort of feelings and insecurities onto others, and this is, I think, a case of that. He definitely was in much more precarious political position in Azerbaijan than Pashinyan was in Armenia, and there's zero doubt in any sane person's mind that this war was, planned and prepared by Turkey and Azerbaijan in the last 2 months. Everybody has been watching the preparations, and we now have plenty of evidence of the mercenaries being prepared and shipped and all of that. So all of those preparations leave no doubt that this was something planned, and this was something organized on sort of an offer from Erdogan to Aliyev, and he took that offer with all of the risks and the potential consequences involved.
Marne, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking, yes, this offer was there from Turkey to Azerbaijan, but at this point we can see that if at some point Turkey pulls back by the international pressure or with other measures, Aliyev will be left alone domestically, and that can actually bring more desperate actions from his side, which is one thing to be concerned, because technically for Turkey it doesn't matter if he goes, and it probably even better if he goes domestically, so they can have their own pro-Turkish government installed in the place of Aliyev. So this is something to be also watching. On the other hand, about the Armenians' engagement or not, I had a couple of thoughts on that, and I was also thinking whether we're not already in a way fully engaged because of the shelling of Vartenis region, because of drones flying over Abovyan and Armenian air defense systems shooting them down literally 2 days ago, and the air defense sirens going on or warnings coming that it will go on soon over Yerevan as well. So I think we are already more engaged than just stand by and watching as a guarantors. So these 2 points would be for me to be, to observe furthermore to see how the Turkish-Azerbaijani collaboration will go. And also there is a hardcore evidence that the Turkey is transporting a lot of goods and weapons through Georgia, not only by airspace, but also on the ground. There have been many videos already coming through the Telegram channels showing Turkish trucks transporting weapons through the Georgian border. And this is also very worrisome and can bring a lot of misunderstanding between Armenia and Georgia. So yeah, it's pretty tough in a sense.
Aspet, you have thoughts on this as well, or no?
I have a comment and a question. The comment is about what Marina mentioned about Georgia, and just recently the Georgian foreign minister announced that they're suspending the issuance of permits for military cargo by land and air routes to Azerbaijan and Armenia over Georgia. Too little, too late, I think, because Armenia has not been receiving much over Georgian territory. But I wanted to pose a question, a thought that has been bothering me as well, and maybe collectively we can try to answer. But there have been calls in Armenia for Armenia to recognize Karabakh's independence. And I'm not, in my mind, I'm not sure what are the pros and cons for such an action. Maybe if Varuzhan is with us, maybe he can start with this and then we can continue, just because I'm worried that he might drop out.
As I told, we're under continuous shelling. Unfortunately, I can't show you how beautiful it is, but to give an interview under this shelling. So there are debates and discussions about the possible recognition by Armenia of the Artsakh's independence, and these discussions were even active before this last war. If you remember, in July we had the similar situation when people were actively discussing the possibility of recognition. We always have this as one of our instruments in our diplomacy, but still I'm not sure that this is something that can really change the situation, because as we already discussed, really the situation is much on ground, and what is really important and what is really decisive and central to the solution of the issue is what's going on the front line. So which side would be more powerful, which side would be more successful, this is the key to the solution. And I would like to just bring an example of the Syrian mercenaries. If we had a very different situation when we have mercenaries, you can imagine how the international community would react to this situation. To the fact that there are mercenaries, in fact, jihadis as well, and radicals. But currently, like everybody sees, everybody knows that nothing really changes because of that or under the influence of that. So the real talk is there on the front line, and after that only we can really discuss the possibility of the recognition of Artsakh, or maybe it will be something different than recognition. It could be recognition and then unification. So these are all talks for the future. Now everything is being decided on the ground and on the front line, and I think that all other debates are just not that much important, of secondary importance.
Speaking of that, Emil, I wanted to turn to you. What do you think are the possible outcomes of the war? How can that affect the overall Nagorno-Karabakh issue in general? And I realize that the situation on the ground will dictate a lot of things, but what are some possible scenarios that you see?
Well, we can see that the overall objective is to push the line forward as much as possible and basically make Stepanakert unlivable with all of the attacks. And if they get closer to it, they'll be attacking only more. That, of course, becomes a situation more similar to a permanent war zone type situation rather than what we've had up until now, which was a relatively peaceful Karabakh and a peaceful life there that's been disrupted right now. So I think that's going to be the main outcome. In terms of, I don't know, any kind of other changes, I really don't see a change as far as the way Armenia is going to approach it or the way Azerbaijan is going to approach it. Earlier, you broached the subject of recognition. I mean, it boggles my mind that Artsakh had not been recognized back in 1991. It boggles my mind it is not recognized yesterday or the day before yesterday. And, Armenia started making taking a clear position that this is their territory and, making that stand diplomatically, in addition to the stand that Nikol Pashinyan demonstrated in his speech, and the Armenian soldiers are demonstrating in the battle. Remove any uncertainty and declare that part of Armenia. I think that's the only way forward.
Alfred?
Yes, Emil. So after this war, the negotiations are definitely going to be completely different. How do you think the negotiations will proceed from here?
I don't see any real negotiations happening with this regime in Azerbaijan beyond ceasefire arrangements, beyond some kind of ceasefire talk and sort of solidifying ceasefire as happened after 2016. But this time it's just going to be much more difficult to do even that. Beyond that, until there is a regime change in Azerbaijan, I really don't see another round of negotiations.
I can add a couple of words. I agree absolutely with Amin on this, and I think also that if we succeed, and I think we are succeeding, I mean, fingers crossed, if the new borderline is drawn, then Aliyev will have to face a lot of problems at home, and that will probably be the end of his regime, and then automatically bring to the new sides of negotiation, which yet again we need to understand whether it's going to be better or worse. But in any case, yes, I absolutely agree.
That was going to be my next question. Is there any chance that
it's not going to be? It's not going to be better. It's not going to be better, but it must happen because that particular politician is wasted at this point. I think internally and externally.
Well, new.
It's just going to happen. It's inevitable. We're going to have to live with it. I'm not saying that it's a good development. It could be a bad development, but like I said, there's not going to be any negotiations with a particular individual. And
well, my question on that, Emil, and also Asped, please. You heard in our conversation yesterday with Girair and Tom Dewal that we don't know who else we would be negotiating with outside of Aliyev over there, because currently there's not a democratic government and there's not really an opposition to deal with. But how do you continue this if not? Well,
we can, like I said, you can negotiate ceasefire just as ceasefire was negotiated before. But beyond that, you cannot have. We're talking about negotiations on peaceful resolution. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, there is no peaceful resolution right now. There is a fight to the death. That's what's happening right now. So, for peaceful resolution process to take place, you have to stop the war, stop the meat grinders, stop the killings, and stop them for a while and move this conflict into a different direction. And maybe next generation would be able to settle it. That's the only way to do it. Beyond that, it's just going to keep going.
While, if I may, I agree with Emil in terms of, when you're fighting, it's in the middle of fighting and accusations and so on and so forth. It's impossible to think about peace process. But the issue is not just about, we're only looking at it from a perspective of if Armenia and Azerbaijan would be willing to go back to the table to negotiate. There's also the possibility that peace can be imposed, be that a ceasefire or a peace agreement can be imposed. And from my analysis or what I've been hearing and looking at things, I feel there is a stronger chance of that happening, as I said earlier, in terms of Russia trying to basically get boots on the ground. And at the same time, having a partial role for Turkey in the region as also an interested party. I mean, the combined hatred that both Russia and Turkey have towards the West, I think, might also be motivating this overall sort of conflict. At the same time, the Western disinterest in the region in the last couple of years and the lack of just lip service that they've been paying actually is just fueling the conflict. I mean, each side views that, and they're pushing forward the argument, Armenian side, more rightfully so, that we're just on our own fighting, and the Azerbaijani side, yes, we're on our own, but we also have support from our brothers in Turkey and so on and so forth. So my concern is that this conflict itself, the war, the fighting, the killing, and so on, will continue up to a point where both sides will be basically welcoming even a Russian presence, Russian peacekeeping presence. It's hypothetical, but it's a possibility. I'm not saying it's a high probability, but it is a possibility.
I'm sorry, but I want to clarify something. The peacekeeping presence we can only talk about is not going to be the peacekeeping presence that we have, for example, had or still have in Bosnia or Yugoslavia, that kind of former
Oh,
Yugoslavia.
absolutely. I mean, you're right.
Yeah, it's going to be
Absolutely.
more of a Syrian scenario where you basically have, the Russians protecting Armenians and the Turks protecting the Azeris. That's what that
Yeah,
kind of scenario
yesterday
does
one of
not
the things I
imply
was
a
mentioning is
resolution.
that,
Yeah.
I was thinking about probably having Turkish and Russian troops facing each other in the line of contact, where Turkey will be the guarantor of Azerbaijan's peace and Russia would be guarantor of the Armenian peace. But in reality, both countries would end up having boots on the ground. You're absolutely right. It wouldn't follow the international peacekeeping model.
So can we just agree that we want our boots to protect us only and nobody else's boots to be there?
I wanted to ask exactly this to Emil. Russia has been very slow in responding to the situation, somewhat oddly passive. Is there any value to having Turkish involvement in this region in its near abroad?
Well, the Russian response has been twofold. On the one hand, yes, diplomatically, it's been very, very timid. It gives rise to the speculations that they really want to wait for the Armenian side to crack somewhat and then come in and save them, basically. And I'm sure that's in Putin's mind. He likes to every once in a while come up as a savior. Especially in this case, he'd be saving, Armenians from Muslims, etc. There's that civilizational angle that Russia likes to pursue with the West, and of course the West is always the dominant thing in his mind. But at the same time, in addition to this diplomatic approach that we've heard from that I mentioned, there is also approach is the military support for Armenia continued, and it's been a robust military support in the last week. So the damage that the Armenian army incurred in the first day of shelling, that was massive, widespread, had been substantially restored with help. So that needs to be kept in mind as well.
Yeah. Well, anything we're talking right now, I think we covered a lot of ground. And I personally am sort of exhausted, but what do you guys, any closing thoughts here?
No, just today's developments on the political arena maybe is worth mentioning that currently all the Karabakh leadership, old and new, and also Armenia's recent leadership, except probably Levon Ter-Petrosyan, are in Stepanakert, Artsakh, and they are all together in this. Also, the president of Artsakh went to the front line with the special forces. So for me, it was a bit interesting messages from that, also domestically, but I think we will come back to this when the ceasefire is agreed and things are calm, and we can also speak about this domestic matters later on with the other podcasts of Groong, most probably.
Yeah, it was very surreal and interesting to see Serge Sarkisyan, and it's welcome to see all this unity. Like I said in the beginning, I wish we had 10% of this unity in peacetime.
Well, I don't think their unity was disrupted in a bigger picture. I think Karabakhs are always been there together, holding each other's back. So,
with the exception of Samvel Babayan and
exactly, yeah. But that's. But even he is.
See, guys, this is one of the things. It's wishful thinking, I think, when it comes to unity. This is the normal thing. Yes, at times of crisis, you would unite, but politics is politics. At the end of the day, everyone will be pushing their own agenda, political. My concern is at the end, whenever this is over, they're going to. I hope it is over. There are going to be accusations flying left, right, and center. Oh, you guys didn't do this. Oh, you guys were not in the front from the first hour. You came in the second hour. Petty stuff, but it's going to be used, unfortunately.
Yes, Aspet, this whole war makes it obvious that when the stakes are very high, we prioritize the real danger to us, which also tells us that the other stakes are relatively low, and we should keep that in mind in times of peace and say, this is not worth fighting over.
Actually, if I may just add a short sentence, I think that no matter what they do domestically and when it's peacetime and whatever, but they all agree upon one point. Nagorno-Karabakh will never be part of independent Azerbaijan, full stop. On this, they are united, and that's all I care about it now. The rest is something that we will deal with it. It's a political education for the entire nation to build state and everything else that comes with it. So...
Let me ask a question here to the panel, to everyone, and I mean everyone. How much willing? See, this is the thing where we talk about the conflict, where about the land. Granted, Karabakh will never be, and no one will be. I mean, Armenian side, no one will be willing to give up Karabakh. But when it comes to the issue of land for peace, how feasible is that under some kind of a pressure from Russia and Turkey, or under Minsk and so on, and return some liberated territories in return for some kind of a long-lasting peace or long-lasting ceasefire? It's a hypothetical question that I have: is that are we willing, or is the Armenian side willing to give up land for peace if it's a guarantee for the peace?
I think one thing that we've learned is that, especially after April War, like that is an old approach to the issue, like lands for peace and something. Because I think the hope that we can find partner in peace on the other side, it faded away starting from probably somewhere 2014, 15, and then 16, and then now. I think at this point we understand that there should be enough buffer zone to protect us from any sort of aggression, because today we stand on the buffer zone so far and we're holding it, and we will continue holding it if not advancing. So I think that is already a wasted issue for us, because there is no trust whatsoever towards the other side. The signals are coming from all sort of peace activists across the line, politicians, civil society of Azerbaijan and others. There is no way that we can absolutely think that we can solve this by negotiating and giving them something for them to leave us alone forever.
Bye,
Thank
John.
you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
And please stay safe. And that concludes our program for this episode of Groong Week in Review. We hope it has helped your understanding of some of the issues from this previous week. We look forward to your feedback and suggestions for issues to cover in greater depth. Contact us on our website at groong.org, that's GROONG, and on our Facebook page, ANN-Groong, or in our Facebook group, Groong-Armenian News Network. Special thanks to Laura Osborne for providing the music for our podcast. I'm Hovik Manucharyan, and on behalf of everyone in this episode, I wish you a good week. Thank you for listening, and talk to you next week.